Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel or becoming a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host, Cyrus, and tonight's video may be the most important video I've ever put up on the site if what I'm going to share with you is true. If half of it is true, then it's the most important video I've put up. If a quarter of it is true, still pretty significant. My estimation is that some version of all of this is accurate, if not all of it, and as such, it is time to share some of the more controversial things I've learned as I've explored my communications with a higher density being, which of course by being I mean a person, a woman, who I noticed in a very friendly way was operating my dowsing rods a couple months ago. When I just hold my rods up, I noticed that it's in a very strange occurrence, always responds accurately to anything that I say to it. This developed into a very close collaboration, which I've been, as you know in this channel, struggling with sometimes, talking about a lot, using to uncover different mysteries, but I began to probe much deeper and also get to know Lorena, aka Kaiswa, much better and discover and grow a telepathic communication as well. This has also led up to an experience a couple nights ago where I briefly encountered her astrally when I put myself in a strange or dangerous situation on the other side, and I called out to her when I needed to, and then she jumped in like a flash to save me and then woke me up out of the experience and then proceeded to take my astral parallel self away to safety. That and numerous other confirmations has led to where we are now. And if this is the first video you've ever watched on Afterlife Topics, this video is perfect actually. In fact, probably this video is the most up-to-date and relevant thing you can watch, even if you don't know who I am. And further, if this video is something that, if you follow this channel for a long time, then this will put, I think, pieces together of the puzzle. A puzzle that maybe I didn't even know existed, concerning the origins of my work and this channel and what's really going on behind the scenes. And also my relationship with my guides that has been propelling the work forward, and explanations about some of the great esoteric mysteries, including the things that make people feel afraid of the other side, including forced reincarnation, soul traps, archons, things of that nature, because all of these intuitives who have had feelings like there's something strange going on, a lot of that gets clouded by paranoia and fear. This is an attempt to get some crystal clear communication about what is going on and the type of things that we do face in this world. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the first slide as we begin to unravel what is known as the Grey Sun of Quotha. This is something that has been revealed to me, although I first learned or began putting pieces of this puzzle together years ago. Learning little, again, pieces of a puzzle where I would get some information and feel like I don't think all of this is true, but there's something going on about this part. Or even with Gnosticism, there's something going on about this part. Or different ET species, there's something going on with these guys. Secret space program insiders, Corey Good, people like that. Oh, there's something going on with these guys. But I never really committed to or bought a lot of those things because sometimes it was too outlandish. And then I began probing into, with my guide, Lorena, about the challenges she faces, and that's when I began to learn about who and what she really is, which is something what I would describe as an angelic entity. So much more than just a person living on this higher plane of existence, the sixth density, but something closer that we would conceptualize as a literal angel. That is much more than she is. She is simply very, very modest. So she didn't arrive into my communication as like, I am Lorena and I'm an angel. It's more like, hi, I'm Lorena and I was born in Turkey a long time ago and blah, blah, blah. Reading between the lines and getting through her humility, I began to realize what she really was. And this opened up a lot of knowledge and a corroboration that we've been doing together, as well as work that I've been doing for her, including, let's just say, intelligence gathering through my community to help her assess possible even negative influences on this planet, because that is her job, is to protect humanity. And right now we're at a point where, let's just say, the good guys are winning. And I think that when this presentation is over, you're going to feel a lot more at ease about the current situation and some of these subjects that causes a little bit of fear and anxiety. So that is actually my intention, and have all of this higher dimensional knowledge which hasn't been released to the public in a concise way. People have seen versions of this, have gotten intel from even military groups that knew a little bit about this. But I think it took this communication, this clear communication with a, someone from that level looking down at us here to get a more precise viewpoint. So I know I'm going on way too long here, so let's just go ahead and jump into the first slide, which is how this information was gathered. Dowsing rods via autonomous movements and slowly spelling out entire paragraphs of text. Telepathic input and third-party blinded corroboration. So the dowsing rods operating first autonomously, so I picked them up and pretty much moves on its own with little to no effort on my part. A subconscious twitch sometimes happens as communicators take control on a subconscious level. But even if I put that to the test, something I find is that oftentimes the rods will move without any effort by me at all. My hands will remain completely still and it'll spell out words. If you give me 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I can get entire paragraphs of text transcribed independently of my own thoughts by my communicator, who has also, is also somebody who I've grown very close to. There's been some bumps, there's been some issues along the way with some things trying to poke holes in that communication, causing interference. And a lot of these things are getting and have been overcome. And there continues to be the next part, which is telepathic input. So it's not just the rods. I've started being able to receive telepathic messages from her, including visualizations of what she looks like, where she lives, her existence, and concepts that she sends me directly into my mind. So that's been expanding with almost every communication. And third-party blinded corroborations. I would not be here discussing this if I hadn't taken concepts and names of things that no one ever heard of before and then began posing them to mediums and getting corroboration about it. Mediums who didn't know what this is because none of this has ever been revealed to the world before. So you can't Google this stuff. And then getting dead on accurate information, the same things that L told me. So that is kind of a big deal. So my afterlife objectivist standpoint finally explained. A common theme in all my work, beginning with understanding life after death in 2015, and let me pull back to the camera real quick and just remind you guys about my first book way back when. Some of you guys have it. Some of you guys who might be at conferences actually have autographed copies of this. Good. My first major full-length book, which I don't know. I mean, always still very proud of it, and I think still a great resource in my opinion as the author. And what has been the major theme all along? What's been a big theme in this whole saga and the stuff we do at Afterlife Topics, this kind of effort to debunk New Age tropes, ideas from limited spiritual movements. As I began getting this guided communication from Kaiswa, that's her Sanskrit true name, it means firefly, birth name. So when she was born, her parents gave her that name because she's half Indian. And her last name is Pamela because her father, of course, was Italian. So her name was Kaiswa Pamela, born in 1911. And second communicator is my Arcturian higher self. And so my first time I found out or heard about me being an Arcturian starseed was from a medium who said, and I never repeated this because it just sounded like stuff that a medium wanted to tell me to make me feel good about myself. You know how I'm a little bit cynical. And the medium said, like, Cyrus, you're not just an Arcturian, you're part of the Arcturian High Council, that you are one of the main big poobah Arcturians. And I'm just like, this is just stuff, you know, everyone has some past life where there's some important figure, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's a nice, thank you. And then Lorena begins telling me, like, you are an Arcturian High Council member and your name is Kilamaja. I'm like, all right. I saw this incredible UFO when I was 11 years old with everybody else in the neighborhood. Came down out of the sky. To get an idea of what it looks like, go on Google, type in Arcturian spaceship, because there's a lot of intuitives who put this stuff down. But it was golden yellow and very, very beautiful looking, landed behind a mountain. And that began also actually my quest for truth at that point. Lorena explained to me that when that incident happened, Kilamaja himself was in that ship checking things, quote, checking things out, and probably knew me, you know, or me seeing that ship would accelerate me thinking about the things that he wanted me as his little, you know, collective soul spawnling, which is a strange way to put it, but that's the word that popped into my mind to think about. So I'd be linked to this Arcturian who is my higher self as well. So that is the information I've kind of corroborated and then got through my communicator as well. So the point is, all this time on this channel, all my efforts and the things that I've talked about in my two primary books has been guided by this inner voice that has always pushed me and nudged me to talk about certain topics. This is the voice in my mind, and I always thought it was just my higher self. You know, and I didn't think my higher self would be some blue-skinned guy with a big forehead and big eyes in some beautiful, luminous starship. I thought my higher self was just, I don't know, an essence of my subconscious mind or something like that, like connected to source and knowing stuff that intuitively bugs me. And I think it would have bugged me anyway. But what was the voice in the back of my mind saying, Cyrus, make a video about this. Cyrus, talk about this. Cyrus, you know, talk some dirt on this person because they are misrepresenting things. Like there was this, you know, there was this background kind of thing going on. And where was it coming from? Well, what it turns out is that all along it was Kaiswa, Kilamaja, maybe another guide as well, but that guide is, I don't know, not that active, I suppose. But it was these other forces that were encouraging me to do this work and specifically go down this path. Now I'm very hesitant to reveal these things because I don't want anyone to revere me. I don't want anyone to think I'm an authority because I'm making an unsubstantiated claim that I'm some important extraterrestrial. Because let's say even if hypothetically I was, maybe Kilamaja has you know, 100, 200, 300, 400 little versions of himself that he spawned into Earth life to help us in a positive way. Maybe I'm just another one of them. Maybe I'm number, you know, 287, and we're all running around like chickens with our heads cut off, not knowing what to do, and I just happen to pick up on the main message. It doesn't make me important, doesn't make me special, doesn't make me something to be revered. It just makes me hopefully a good journalist who has a good source. You know, that's pretty much all I care about. It's always what I've been as a journalist. That's my formal training. It's what I've always cared about, and that is where we are. So this information is going to explain, like, why was I always so concerned, like orb of lights, you know, why am I so concerned with people who talk about we die, we lose our individual selves, we die, we join an ocean of bliss, an ocean of pure consciousness, pure enlightenment. We give up the material attachments forever. We discard our bodies, we join the collective of source, and we don't need our individualities anymore. We join that forever. Then, because I've always thought, like, yeah, maybe you can. My guide says she can enter a state of mind like that anytime she wants. She just has to meditate, and she enters these states of almost like samadhi consciousness. It's like instantaneous access on her level of existence. She can merge with source and still be herself at the same time. It's an inner thing, not an external thing. That inner thing is part of the foundation of why she's so advanced and why she's an angelic being. So all that information is true, but I always felt there was something manipulative about how those concepts of unity consciousness that are so important were being taught, because it was being taught in a weird, creepy, exclusionary way. And even, you know, the great Jürgen Ziva, and I'll try to bring a picture of him up, on the group talks about this as well. He's noticed this creepy thing. It's like, you can't eat chocolate when you die, spit it out. But I'm sure he would certainly agree that there was some kind of an unhealthy spin on very important subjects. And so what I'm going to propose is why this happens, why my higher selves have nudged me along, and it concerns a force in the universe which naturally is aligned this way and believes it has the best interests of everyone, and is a spin-off of God itself, of source consciousness. That is the short story, but let's go into the deeper elements of it. What was revealed? At the beginning of time and existence, source consciousness divided itself into endless individual units, which is us. Source consciousness divided itself into a finite, which is only a few, a dozen, no, it might be more than that, I think a couple hundred, some finite number, as it was inventing even the concept of finity as well, because maybe everything was infinite at that point. Amount of ultimate greater fragments of itself in an attempt to understand and explore existence. In a way, these we could call gods, because they also represent concepts in nature and essences in nature that can be tapped into. The light of God seen in NDEs, therefore, we could say, had like a kid brother. So using a 6th density, quote, angelic time scale, the source of the birth of existence calculated in finite years is incomprehensible, and yet a digit exists. And the digit is quite ridiculous, and it's almost like a kid making stuff up. It's like, I want to use the Xbox, a Googleplex times a Googleplex more than you. So these higher density beings, though, believe if you use mortal Earth-Sun cycle rotational attributes, that this thing that we're talking about called the Grey Sun is 2,000 Nimcons old. And each Nimcon is a Googleplex times a Googleplex. So it's an incomprehensible number. It's easier to just say infinity, as this isn't accurate as well. Yet, to use this time scale, we can say that nothing in existence is older than 2,000 Nimcons. It is the source of creation when source consciousness itself split into this other version of itself. I'm calling it a kid brother, because it's not, again, like there was a rebellion in heaven where Lucifer is like, I reject all the ways of my creator. It's more like, I'm going to make part of existence this thing that's different than what I'm doing right now. I'm going to create a different element, and that's going to balance the rest of existence, the rest of the multiverse. And that is this gray star entity. So let's go into what I saw. An enormous light, like an incredible star. At this point in my communication with Elle, I asked her to telepathically input into my mind what it is that she's talking about. So I see this incredible star, yet its luminosity was somehow dull. And this made me say to Lorena, so you're showing me a gray sun. Yes, she answered, that is a great description, but this is my own term. On her side, others have called it the cold star, but its quote name is Quotha, and one of the 6 density beings helping with this communication makes it clear that Quotha is not a name that we gave it to understand it or based upon some ancient culture, that apparently, allegedly, this is the name that the entity, that this division of God named itself, and it's basically interpreted into our phonetics. So if that's true, then Quotha is the name of what it is that it gave itself, as hard as that might be to believe. So where and what is it? Quotha, by its nature, as I mentioned before, rebelled against Source splitting into its brother. But this doesn't match, let's say, biblical accounts. What it does is shows you that consciousness, source consciousness, God, wanted to create a division of itself and to make that part of the universe and allow it to do its own thing. It was willful creation of God as well, so it wasn't this evil thing or this ultimate evil. In fact, it's actually not evil at all. It does, however, have its view that its creator imparted it with. It believes all densities above 5th are inferior to a better existence of its own creation ruled by collectivization. That is its essence. So when you see in nature a beehive, and all the bees are surrounding a single queen, that is Quotha, the essence of Quotha. When you see an ant colony and all the ants are working in collectivization for their queen, that is the essence of Quotha in nature. When you see this happening in nature, even in inanimate objects, or you see it happening in physics, there's Quotha again, providing this element to life. But in a strange way, because it considers itself now the queen, right, or the queen bee. So just as we see that as above, so below, we see that in an ant colony. Well, a lot of these ants are suffering and have less individuality, but then the single ruler of that colony has an enormous amount of kind of individual power and awareness. It's the same thing here. So Quotha obtained its own enormous individual power and awareness, and now considers itself the ruler of all 5th density and below creation. As a refresher, 5th density is the astral cosmos. So when we go into the other side, the astral world that has the, it's like the copy of the world we're in now, and we can actually look in the back of my second book to illustrate that. So as you can see here, back up the afterlife and beyond. Why are there 2 Earths on the back of the book? Because there are 2 Earths. One is in 3rd density, and the other one is in 5th density, so it's right here. But they're merged into each other. Just like we have astral bodies, the entire cosmos is in this other dimension, the same world we're in now, higher frequency. That's the 5th density, and it's the density where all the interesting stuff in the cosmos goes on. Our density, 3rd density, pretty uneventful almost. But this is where it all happens, right here in 5th density. So my communicator explains to me this entity, because it considers itself the ruler of the 5th density, it has 0 influence in higher densities, what we call the higher astral plane. So where she exists, this thing doesn't get into it. There's no sign of it. It doesn't cause any problems. And its followers don't really exist there, because its whole thing is to be the foundation and the ruler of 5th density and below, including our density, 3rd density. For 3rd and 4th density, kind of the same deal, sharing our same cosmos presently. Because it's a 5th density being, it therefore inhabits a universe like ours in a physical, singular space, unlike God, unlike source consciousness, which is everywhere and everything and is on some density scale that's unimaginably high. This thing is down on 5th density. So where it exists is another universe. in the, I would say, near infinite, not infinite, but very, very vast, actually, multiverse of different universes, all existing, in the entire creation. So this one universe that houses Quotha is known as the domain of Quotha, and it's known by all higher level beings. They all know that this is where it comes from. And in this one universe, all trillion galaxies in that one distant universe contain quintillions of civilizations, all who worship Quotha. So it is the origin of Quotha, and all of them are elements of Quotha in that universe. In the center of the universe, there is a star the size of an entire galaxy. And this is Quotha itself in physical form. And this is the Grey Sun. It sends its influence across all creation, all universes in the multiverse via a signal that gets out there and gets everywhere. And if you listen to that signal, aside from it being part of nature itself, it's calling civilizations to join its collectivization. And cut. Had to take a break, and also had to turn the air conditioner on. It is a hot night out here in Arizona, and I know that the sound in the background is not ideal, but I can't just sit here sweating either. I even changed my clothes and took a walk and ate some food. I was feeling a little bit sick from the usual reasons, post-COVID-y stuff. But anyway, now since I'm back, let's go ahead and continue where I left off, which was the personality of Quotha. So at this point, L wanted to emphasize that, in fact, this being is legitimately loving and compassionate. So it's not just a fake pretending to love its subjects. It's a reflection, a mirror of God itself, of Source. Being a reflection or a mirror of Source, loves its subjects in a similar way. So an encounter with the light of Quotha, when you say it was a loving and beautiful light, it would actually be a loving and beautiful light. It wouldn't be some negative entity pretending to be a loving and beautiful light. It would be a loving and beautiful light because it's a loving and beautiful light who actually cares about all the souls in the universe. Which in some way, that might be a problem, because it's not something that you would detect as being deceptive, because it's not deceptive. It's doing what it thinks is best for people who are in their hearts following it. With that said, let's talk about what the path of the Grey Sun represents. So in this case, it is a legitimate spiritual path by what we are calling the Brother of God. It is a focus on collectivization and not the individual, and thus aligns to people of that mindset. As we talked about before, it is also an inherent part of the universe, nature. If you see an ant colony, that is Quotha in action. Now, when it comes to Quotha's existence in culture and how it influences people, there are some mediums, like one pictured, and spiritual teachers who, without realizing it, channel the path of the Grey Sun. And I put on the screen Suzanne Giesemann, and because the thing that sparked some of this attention, at least me going public with this, was two separate posts on the Afterlife Topics Facebook group of people saying, what's going on with Susan Giesemann? Why is she talking about, do we dissolve into nothingness? And then on that video, kind of implying that we do. How come a few months ago, she is saying some equivalent of there is no physical touch or sensation when we cross over? Now, why wouldn't there be? Because one element, it seems like, of this heavenly environment on the path of Quotha would be becoming like a data stream, would be becoming basically information in a vast, cosmic, bliss-infused, happy database. And those who follow this path and want that will be channeling this as the ideal paradise that we go into. Now I put down below, don't contact Susan Gazeman and say some unkind things like, oh, you're serving an archon or anything like that. Just a talented and helpful medium serving a path of collectivization and preaching its gospel. The sixth density communicator known as Lelm reports to me that her spirit team, the one that she channels, that she talks about, I don't remember the name of it offhand, Sisana, something like this, is not Quotha. She herself, however, like similar, quote, New Age mediums, is twisting the message that she gets from her real spirit team and infusing it with Quothan ideas, because she herself may be aligned in some way to that realm. Now, why the spirit team doesn't recognize this or try to circumvent it or point it out to her, don't know. I can't say that I envy that spirit team when their message is being changed to fit this type of narrative. They might not even notice it because she may be painting it all up in so much, I should say wrapping it in so much bubble wrap that it's tough to distinguish that, hey, you know, these ideas are leaning more toward Quothan beliefs. Because the light of God can be unity consciousness surrounded by source and surrounded in a state of internal and external bliss. These are kinds of things that happen with, you know, real, actual source consciousness, the actual God. Now, you can describe the same thing about being in a Quothan demi-plane of existence. The difference is when we start talking about not having physical sensation, not having a true body, not having the ability to function like we used to, or being in a limited capacity. Because by nature, Quotha, when you go into the great beyond being guided by the Grey Sun, you are more likely to end up in an environment like that. You know, they want to prepare people to not be thinking about having bodies because they prefer people to become like data than as individuals. Okay, so the conflict between still being an individual and harmonizing with all creation, the path of God, versus joining a greater collective and rejecting spiritual densities designed for individual exploration, which is the path of Quotha, who is also a part of God. So there's a conflict between these two things. Still being an individual while harmonizing with creation versus being a greater collective and rejecting spiritual densities that allow individual exploration. So Quotha doesn't have a use for that type of thing. Quotha demands machine-like purity and absolutism. No negative emotions. Where have we heard that before? This entity feels like negative emotions are impure things from a pure existence. Also known as spiritual bypassing. Something I've talked a lot about this channel is that weird tendency. It's like we must eliminate anything that's negative, or negativity does not exist. There is no room for variability. Quotha demands absolute efficiency to make a system perfect. That's the way this being operates. Is this a useless way of being? No. Obviously, when a system is operating perfectly, that can be used to great benefit. But do you want to enter this as an afterlife? That's the question. Because it doesn't sound like an afterlife that's suited for individual exploration. It's an afterlife suited to become machine-like. But in Quotha's mind, that's okay because it's about efficiency, purity, and perfection. Why not strive for perfection is what they think. And instead of finding the beauty in the imperfect, which is how God operates. Quotha represents hive minds orbiting a singular supreme ruler as seen in nature and politics. So again, the beehive, the bees are linked to a collective mind. The queen bee might in fact be a strong individual entity itself. But the little worker bees are not. So it's the same thing mirroring itself, as above so below. Quotha is this supremely individualistic being. So some things that Quotha is likely to reject: an individual body, a locus of awareness, individual thoughts, emotions, desires, passion, all optional and impure habits when seeking perfection. Does any of this sound familiar to you guys who follow the channel and the things that I like to criticize? Have you ever noticed certain writers, teachers, mediums that out of the blue start bad-mouthing these concepts? So Quotha has no room for imperfection, whereas I could say the real God, Source Consciousness, celebrates the beauty in imperfection. So we can see that difference between those two concepts. Let's turn now to Quotha's influence. As I say before, it's a representative essence that can be found also in nature, even in physics, where there's a collectivization and de-individualization, extreme unified power. We may see the touch of Quotha. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see a picture of me and a couple of friends. The guy on the right is Jordan Harbinger, the Jordan Harbinger podcast, a very well-respected podcast. I can't exactly say he talks about any of these subjects, but the point is that we were all in North Korea back in 2013. Communism very easily can spiral out of control in a quest for this idyllic society. It can go bad very quickly, and there's no better example of that than North Korea. And so the ironic thing to do as someone who doesn't support what that country is doing is dress up like communists and do a photo shoot, because that's something they do in North Korea. When you're a tourist here, put on this Stalin outfit and let's do some photos for fun, which is pretty ironic. So there was no better example of I would say Quothianism, now using this galactic language, on the planet today than in Stalinist North Korea. North Korea is still the example of sort of how this attitude built on a premise that's supposed to help everybody and supposed to be a good thing can so easily fall apart. And that is also the essence of how this entity operates and why it can be a problem. So, as we say, communism, the internet, Facebook, transhumanism, a focus on the technological versus the spiritual, all of this could be argued as related to the Grey Sun. Even materialism involves a focus on this density, not worlds far beyond. So this too is the influence of this group soul. What is it that motivates people like Tyson or Bill Nye or Michael Shermer? These guys would be so motivated against spiritual concepts, even when they can be proven to be true. What is the behind-the-scenes motivation? It could be influenced by this, what we call the cold star, or the Grey Sun. So when we die, we see the light of God as explained through all the near-death experiences that we read about. But if your personality and spirit matches this path, you may instead see the light of God's brother, Quotha, which is going to look pretty similar to the light as we usually see it. And as such, Quotha has much more interest in you reincarnating than continuing into the other side. Its domain that it considers to be its own is 3rd, 4th, and 5th densities. So dying and going up to 6th density, higher astral world, is not what it wants. And as such, now we can understand the half-truths of so many David Icks and people like that out there, and David Icks and David Wilcox. People who almost have a accurate picture of things, but sometimes half-truths, are worse than full untruths, because it can cause confusion and issues among people. So the idea that there is a false light belief system, a false light New Age teaching system, is a half-truth, because it's not a false light, it is a real light. It's a different light, a different path, a different spiritual philosophy that is also part of nature, that somebody can be aligned to, and then in that situation, as they've told me, you may get quote-unquote tricked because this alternative light may not reveal itself as I'm Quotha, I'm not the actual source consciousness, the actual God, and I want you to reincarnate to follow my teachings. In its mind, it's doing you a favor. It's not tricking you, it's helping you. It's like, I want to help you see the real path to perfection and bliss, and follow me, and come maybe temporarily into a holding area on the 5th density, and then go back and reincarnate, or tell the world the path of Quotha, and that people should seek perfection in life and not go into the imperfect light of my brother. As such, is it possible to believe that Quotha has a benefit in nature and society? Well, my communicators tell me yes. Quotha is known for technology that unifies. Star seeds of Quotha serving civilizations like the Nimcon, which is something you're going to hear a lot of in the future on this channel, are extremely smart, technological, and revolutionary. They are concerned with people being disconnected from each other, disharmony, disunification. And these obviously can be issues, and who are the experts at reharmonizing people? Those who follow the path of the Grey Sun. They also believe in data and artificial creations of reality as superior to our own. Why ascend into other realms when we can create our own here in this world? So it's a bit like the film The Matrix. When they're creating matrices, machines, creating these sub-realities, that's a very Quotha-based theme. And yet still, perhaps in The Matrix, they cared somewhat. If you watch the film The Animatrix, you'll see the machines in that film cared about the human race and used them as batteries. So they were extremely efficient, but also kind, because the world ended and it was kind of the humans' fault, and the machines didn't want to annihilate or make the humans go extinct. They tried to create a perfect world. Humans rejected it, so they created an imperfect world in a desperate attempt just to make humans happy. And they created that whole virtual system while they were the masters. So it's a very Quotha-themed film, which also, interestingly enough, shows at the signs of it not necessarily being an evil force, because, as in The Matrix, the machines, in their strange way, they could have just kept humans unconscious, but they were deeply concerned with the consciousness and the well-being of humanity. So that is the case for the machines in The Matrix not being all that bad. Not all beings are on a Quotha hardline path. Maybe some want to use its incredible technology to help a civilization ascend normally. A Quothan entity may be halfway Quotha and halfway on a normal path of following the real God, I should say the primary God, and as such believe that technology can be implemented to help unify us without going full into a Quothan subrealm or being converted into data. So there's going to be a lot of beings who have that balance. So as such, they care about the big picture subjects and not so much the individual. Obviously, as I probably pointed out with the examples of communism, good on paper, but can easily go horribly wrong. A Quotha-aligned civilization will as such have star seeds, just like many other ET races have star seeds. You can read Dolores Cannon's books for a lot of info about that, but half the planet, according to a lot of different sources, are in fact star seeds. The Quothan civilizations, in particular the Nimcon, have many star seeds on this planet. L explains this includes good people who care about humanity. The New Age kind of consciousness soup paths, these people are often, quote, loving even if they think you should be deleted to join the hive mind. So, pretty weird philosophy, but it's not like you meet them and then they want to attack and kill you like the Daleks or the Cybermen from Doctor Who. It's a bit different. So everyone loves Quotha's soul group technology. Fun stuff, VR, social media. You can see on the screen there a Nimconian starseed named Mark Zuckerberg. As with other Nimconian starseeds, kind of a hollow look, kind of a machine-like presence, a machine-like personality, an incredible drive to use technology to unify everybody together. That's how he obtains his meaning. This great motivation. I'm going to unify and make the world a better place through technology, but it would be kind of nice if I'm the queen bee and then all these unified souls are hovering around me and serving me. That might be a plus. Meeting Quotha itself, generally positive experience once again. So you're not going to have an experience with Quotha and think this was a pure evil H.P. Lovecraftian dark god. It's going to be more like, what a nice loving entity that has its best interests in mind for all of us. That said, let's continue on to as above, so below. With the Quothan spirit, we can see the horrors of communism. Communism is, the intent is good, to unify, collectivize, and make everything equal, even if you have to enforce it. When we see inequality, you see injustice, you think, I want to enforce equality. In action, though, what we ended up with is Mao, Stalin, and Pol Pot. The star seeds of Quotha civilizations like the Nimcon may have a good intent, but end up creating, or have the possibility to create, unimaginable evil. And this is represented throughout our universe. This is why Quothan civilizations like the Nimcon are considered by my guides to be the greatest threat in the entire universe. Specifically the Nimcon. Of 1 trillion galaxies, the Nimcon have influence and forces in all 1 trillion galaxies in the universe. As such, it gets worse. So this disconnection from the real source leaves room for these dark vibrations to fester. Groups like the Nimcon are extremely technological and started off as a materialist civilization, and did not learn spiritual paths of growth, self-development. They became almost entirely cybernetic with a singular ruler on their home planet. So how did the Nimcon begin? Imagine our planet ruled by the materialists, creating, their unified government with a kind of technocracy and lots of transhumanism, and we will bypass spiritual realms because we don't even believe in spiritual realms, and we will make a superior version using artificial technology, and we will become our own gods in a way, and then we will be collectivized without flaw as a perfect society. With the Nimcon, it caused corruption over the course of billions of years. So this is a 13 plus billion year old civilization. Actually, I think it's like 14 or 15 billion years old. I will do a lot more about their origins, what they are, what they look like, where they are, either in a video or eventually in my third book. But the information I am receiving is that over billions and billions of years, they basically evolved, if you want to call it that, into superior artificial beings, which sometimes represent themselves as literal machines. But a Nimcon might also look like a biological person or still have biological parts. But it is a machine-like collective that uses artificial power, invention, innovation, and unification to have extraordinary power in this particular universe. But because of their total disconnection from spiritual source, and even probably beginning as a disbelief, it caused corruption and evil tendencies over billions of years. And Quotha is okay with all these evil tendencies because Quotha is blindsided. Whatever serves a great collective cause, even if the servants are becoming themselves almost shadow entities, corrupted by kind of dark vibration. And as such, this is similar to many other Quotha evolved civilizations. Lorena tells me Quotha's home universe is the source of much evil throughout all of existence. The entire multiverse seems to be aware of the singular universe that the Grey Sun resides in. This singular universe is home to quintillions of civilizations. Many are similar to the Nimcon, and many have no ethical understanding and become corrupted by darker forces down below and actually end up taking on traits of cruelty and sociopathy. The Nimcon starseeds exist across Earth like other starseeds, but they serve their own hive. So unlike the starseed of a friendly race like Illyrian, Nimcon starseed is usually on a mission, like our friend Zuckerberg, to promote Quotha, in this case I should say Nimconian ideals, which are also the same as Quothan ideals. Hold on one second, I desperately need a drink of water. So the Nimconian starseed may have limited emotion, cold, and even sociopathic sometimes personality tendencies, but a lot of emphasis on perfection, which a lot of psychologists would probably look at as being unhealthy. To the Nimconian, it's perfectly healthy. On the flip side, some are good, charitable, caring, and on a mission to unify and remove injustice. The bad ones, however, represent the chief threat to this planet, the entire galaxy, but yet are completely impotent against higher spiritual worlds. What this means is that if you're on a higher plane of existence, the higher astral plane, what we call the sixth density, a more evolved version of the middle astral plane, that apparently 80% of us go to the middle level, and about 20% of us roughly kind of have the gumption to go into that higher level, then you don't have to worry about any of this, because these things don't even exist on there. It seems like they can't even exist on there without betraying what they believe in. So according to my communicators, there was no evidence, there was no sign, there was no issue with any of these things when you get to a certain level. So these things right away only exist as an existential threat to this lower level of existence that we are on. So are the Nimcon this clear and active threat right now? So the short answer is yes. However, Kaiswa, my communicator, does emphasize the importance of remembering that these are, in her words, small-minded beings that are being dealt with, even though they've been influencing our Earth for eons. Not just as directly as Quothans, I should say, they're civilizations that work through that philosophy, which would be the Nimconians. They've also corrupted other species. And by corrupted, that's a loose term, because, for example, there is a reptilian species, sometimes they call them Draco. They're large, big, kind of alligator-faced beings, being lizards. They're sort of cold, logical beings anyway, so they're attracted to Nimconian technology. They're attracted a bit to Quotha perfectionism. So they integrate Nimconian technology into their being. And the plus side is that maybe it gives them a perspective of being a little more benevolent to help unify people and places, right? Because the Nimconians have that little bit of veneer. So a very warlike lizard brain race, like these big alligator-faced reptilians that we hear about. Maybe there's a little bit of a balance that comes by integrating with the Nimconian collective. The flip side is they slowly become the servants of the hive mind, which pretty much wants to just keep expanding, conquering, and invading. So when you look down the daisy chain, there's different ET groups, all of which are unified under this Nimconian umbrella and end up actively working in whatever morally questionable way they can to ultimately colonize and convert planet Earth. That's what they want to do, like with many planets all around the universe. But they have a very bad batting average, although they have taken down an incomprehensibly large number of galaxies, apparently millions. They have a presence in all 1 trillion galaxies. And so if every single civilization, every single galaxy has attempted to been overtaken by these beings, it's like 99.8% of them are able to fight them off, because most people just don't jive with this very kind of unusual niche way of looking at reality through it's not an imposter God or a fake light, but it's an alternative system to God that doesn't feel natural to most of us. So let's continue with what Kaiswa recommends that we do. So she says to avoid transhumanism. That is a gateway. There's a subconsciously channeled work called Star Trek, and the beings known as the Borg are very much like what we're dealing with, except it's not so black and white evil in real life. They can even physically resemble entities like that because someone of this philosophy or who joins a group like the Nimconians, they might actually look like any race that you see, including humans, but they're cybernetically altered and enhanced. So there's an element of that to them, which can range from not, being ugly looking like Borg on to actually being ugly looking like Borg, being literally part machine. So that's what you sometimes get with these entities. But I say sometimes because some of them might not be like that. Nonetheless, she says, do not be paranoid or fearful all the time, because these forces, while controlling much of our life and civilization for eons, are currently losing on an epic scale on Earth, while Lorena herself is participating in these battles as an angelic soldier. And that's a tough one to wrap one's mind around. I have been struggling with all of this for the last couple of months. But that is what she is saying, as well as another communicator, as well as some independent corroboration. She says, do not downplay your individual God-given individuality or existence. And this includes what we have been talking about with these kind of new age false light teaching paths that do tell you to surrender who you are as a God-given creation, join a collective. That is basically Quothan philosophy planting feelers around. Care about people individually and not just for the collective good. So there's a lot of old morality tales. Do you give up the individual for the collective if the end result is better than the means to get there? Generally focus more on the individual. You should avoid hard fundamentalist organized religions, especially ones that promote worshiping a singular entity or ruler. Now, Kaiswa really likes Hinduism. In fact, he says Western religions may be riskier, even though Eastern religions focus so much on reincarnation. An over influence on reincarnation is this kind of Quothan philosophy. However, reincarnation can also inhabit the normal spectrum of philosophy, because some reincarnate for individual self-growth so they can go to yet higher planes of existence. That's actually the opposite of what the Quothans want. The Quothans want to keep you in one density of existence so that you can expand that density and then avoid the natural higher densities going upward toward a cosmic, galactic, God level of existence. Kaiswa recommends achieving what they call the sixth density of consciousness after you die. No force of the Grey Sun would or could ever go near you if you become sixth density, and as long as you're on sixth density. If you go back down to fifth density, yes, you may have to deal with this type of thing. So this is all topics to talk about in the future, but about 20% of the population, according to these communicators, is already sixth density or higher. And if you can get to that level, then there may be a whole different string of problems and challenges to face besides this particular single challenge. Sixth density fights these entities, for example, the Nimconians and Quothan idealists, to protect this world and the next world over. But they don't do it to protect their own world, because these things can never touch their world because they come from a higher spiritual reality. Consciously reject Quotha and seek only the true light of God upon death. So that's a big one as well. Basically what we're doing right now is priming people about that. As long as you're aware of these issues, then Quotha or an entity that serves Quotha is not going to be able to fool you. One I almost missed was, don't believe that every Quotha worshipping being or Nimcon, extraterrestrial or starseed, is evil, although a lot of them are evil. Doesn't mean all of them are evil. So that's the thing that makes us human and makes them more like machines, is that we can see the nuance in the black and white in situations, whereas that soul group collective has a more difficult time doing that. But you can meet an individual Nimcon and be impressed by their, general compassionate nature. We have a quote by Lelm, which is a 6th density being who has been helping us as well and communicating. And he says, listen to me. Quotha understands how to disguise himself as anything. The nature of a person is what attracts Quotha to them. 6th density communicator Lelm, July 2021. And what Lelm is saying is that a lot of this talk of, there's this fake entity, the fake light that is impersonating our loved ones. What's going on there is that it's a possibility. It can happen that Quotha will take a possible idealist of its own. It might take a possible advocate, a possible servant of his, and string it along by pretending to be different loved ones, by pretending to be the real God, or I should say its brother, the primary source consciousness, or the light of God. It can do all these things to carry someone along for a ride to end up serving it more or reincarnating and fit those agendas. According to my communicator, while Quotha may trick a person into believing it is anything else it wants, including the true life, I should say the true light, rejecting Quotha, understanding this topic means that you are safe. Being tricked, according to these sources, only happens 2, 3, 4% of the time. Which, again, these are their stats, and I don't know anything if this is accurate completely or not, but this is just what they're telling me. You don't have to be afraid. In fact, it's kind of a cosmic joke, because you kind of have to be gullible to fall into a situation where you pass away and then the Grey Sun of Quotha comes to meet you because you've spent your life maybe being a little bit too left-brained. And maybe if you're an engineer, you need to be a little bit cautious. If your whole life's pursuit is finding perfection in things, and you're a little bit machine-like, you may be at higher risk of being met by the machine god itself and kind of being strung along to follow it on its path, so it can have more people added to the collective, which is all it cares about. But it's kind of a cosmic joke, kind of like how out of touch do you have to be to fall for that? So when people talk about the reincarnation trap and entities like this, which we would be able to call at this point the demiurge or the archonic forces, this is what that is. Obviously, this is the thing that the Gnostics were talking about. This is the thing that the Gnostics were fighting and are still fighting. They're aware through clairvoyant ability. They are aware through their teachings that this thing exists. They didn't have quite all the details, but that's what it is. But instead of it being this all-encompassing existential threat to our souls, again, it's kind of a cosmic joke. It's not extremely difficult to avoid this thing and not go down that path, especially if you don't want to go down that path. And in a weird way, the Grey Sun has a level of empathy itself, even though it may be the biggest megalomaniac in existence. But if you don't want to go down its path, most likely the Grey Sun is going to be like, well, I'm not going to interrupt your free will. You follow the path that serves you. If you want to follow the path of my brother, then please follow the path of my brother and let me know if I can be of any service to you in the future. That's kind of the attitude that it has. So people might meet the false light and be like, oh, it was a loving light, and they wouldn't be lying. And other beings maybe get that sense of acceptance because they are rejected. They don't, they're very machine-like themselves, and they need a special place to belong. And Quotha brings that being into its fold, and maybe it's a positive thing for everybody. But it can also go horribly wrong, unlike anything else in existence almost. So for more about this, you should stay tuned to this channel as well as my future books, because even though this information can only be corroborated by other mediums and sources, obviously it's not religion, it's not gospel. So you have to stay vigilant in learning about this, but I feel confident enough that the information should be opened up and exposed to the public. So that said, let's go ahead and look at a special thanks, which is to, of course, Kaiswa, aka Lorena, a 6th density angelic warrior who deals with these issues every day as her job. I'm going to talk more about her, I think, coming up. Special thanks to Lelm, the 6th density Jinn, as they are operating out of the Middle East, who serves the good guys with great resolve and has helped to elaborate on a bunch of L's concepts when I went to talk to him for a bit of confirmation. Special thanks to the corroborating mediums and other dowsing and pendulum communicators who have helped to allow me to confirm some of this information. Other Afterlife Topics members to help put pieces together over a long period of time. So keep an eye out for the working title of my next book, which is Life on the Astral Plane, where much more about Quotha, the Nimcon, and a million other subjects are going to be revealed. So you can always get in touch with me at afterlifetopics.com, keep up to date on the channel, subscribe to this channel, or pretty soon I'll have a pre-order area or a place just to leave your email address, and then you'll know when that book is published. Be mindful of any inconsistencies, mistranslations, or possible errors in this report, because again, it's not a religion. Finally, see the upcoming videos like the truth about, quote, angels and the war in heaven, as this will tie into yet more, even greater perspectives about what higher dimensional warrior beings are doing about situations like this and how they operate, and how that's even been conceptualized through the ages through the idea of the beautiful angelic warrior, and how there is, turns out, something like this really going on. So pretty remarkable. Oh my god, I got through all of this and it's very late. Oh my. Frankly, I'd love, if this were a live stream, I feel like we should be doing some kind of meditation or prayer or something, just to guarantee that the negative influences continue to get run out of town. And I believe that they are. All the information points they are. And I didn't even get into talking about what Elle and others have spoken heavily about in my communications, which is the shift. The same shift that is spoken of so much by Dolores Cannon, how that is going to be a nail in the coffin for Nimconians, Quothan idealists, and other types of negative entities. It's going to put them at a huge disadvantage as our density, 3rd density, begins to move upward. And a lot of the methods that they use to take advantage of us is actually going to go downhill. And also, as a perk, with our density raising, communications with other beings is going to get a lot easier than using dowsing rods. We're talking about them telling me about 3 years from now, I might be able to communicate actively digitally with them or with Kaiswa, because we'll be so near each other. Suddenly they opens up opportunities that just weren't there before, methods of communication that we couldn't even imagine as possible and never has been possible before in history, according to these communicators. So it is a very interesting time if that intelligence is correct. I need to go to sleep now. Please subscribe to the channel. Think about becoming a patron right now. Very, very important time to become a patron. At patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Help support this work as I get a lot more stuff out there. And I can always offer one-on-one time, even with my communication with these higher beings. I can help people find their starseed backgrounds and past lives and things like that to help support the work. And so get in touch with me down below if you want to work with me for those purposes, just to keep some food on the plate while I'm spending hours at a time using the rods going A, B, C, D, D, A, E, I, O, dog. Did you spell dog? No, you spelled God. You know, see what I mean? It's tedious for myself and for these beings. So That's why I'm pretty busy these days doing this and trying to sort my brain out and verify what's going on. Is all this information I'm being flooded with totally the real deal? How can I vigilantly look at different options? But my gut, my instinct tells me this is all pretty accurate and stuff that they're telling me that we really need to learn about ASAP. And that's why I made this video. Please share this video. If there's ever a video to share, it's this one, being possibly the most important video on this channel. So this is the one that needs to get out there. This is the information that needs to be heard and people need to become aware of. With that said, we are finished. So thank you for watching this presentation and watching Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics.